The small town of Oak Ridge wasn't on any tourist maps. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the same families had lived for generations, and where the local fire station stood as a proud symbol of community service. The fire station had its own little world inside. The firefighters were like a family. They joked, argued, celebrated, and protected each other. They also had their traditions. Some were good, like the annual barbecue that brought the whole town together. Others were, well, less good. Naomi Jackson didn't know about these traditions when she joined the Oak Ridge Fire Department as their newest EMT. She had moved from the city about 30 miles away, hoping for a fresh start in a place where the air was cleaner and life moved a bit slower. She was 29, smart, and determined to prove herself in her new workplace. From her first day, Naomi felt the eyes on her. She was different, the only black woman in a department of mostly white men. Some were welcoming, offering to show her around or explain how things worked. Others watched from a distance, whispering when they thought she couldn't hear. "She won't last a month," one said. "City folks never do." But Naomi was tougher than they thought. She did her job well, arrived early for shifts, and stayed late when needed. She learned names quickly and tried to fit in without losing herself. Her patient care was excellent, and even some of the doubtful ones had to admit she knew what she was doing. Then came that humid July evening, about 3 weeks after she started. The station was quiet. No calls had come in for hours. Naomi was taking her break, sitting outside to call her mom, when 3 firefighters approached her. There was Rodney, with his loud laugh and faded tattoos. Then Pete, who always seemed to be chewing gum and looking bored. And their leader, Jack, whose family had been firefighters in Oak Ridge for 4 generations. "Hey, rookie," Jack called out. "We've got a little tradition here for newcomers." Naomi put her phone away. She wanted to fit in, to be accepted. What kind of tradition? Their smiles should have warned her. "Nothing big," Pete said, unwrapping a new piece of gum. "Just a little initiation. Everyone does it." Before she could ask more questions, they surrounded her. What started as playful pushing turned into something else entirely. They grabbed her arms, ignoring her protests that quickly turned to demands. "Let me go. This isn't funny." But they were laughing, dragging her toward the tall metal flagpole in front of the station. Rodney pulled out a roll of duct tape from his pocket. "Guys, stop. I'm serious." Naomi struggled, but there were 3 of them and 1 of her. They pushed her against the pole and began wrapping the tape around her, binding her to the cold metal. Her uniform stuck to her skin in the summer heat as she fought against them. "It's just a joke," Jack kept saying. "Don't be so sensitive." Other firefighters walked by. Some looked uncomfortable, others laughed, but nobody stepped in to help. The department's oldest member, Frank, shook his head as he passed but said nothing. The message was clear: this is how things are done here. Naomi stopped struggling once she realized it was useless. The tape was tight around her legs and chest, holding her firmly against the pole. Her face burned with humiliation and anger as the 3 men high-fived each other and took pictures. What none of them noticed was Riley, a young firefighter who had been washing trucks around the corner. Riley had seen everything and, disturbed by what was happening, had recorded the whole thing on a phone. That night, unable to sleep, Riley sent the video to several people, including the current fire chief. By morning, the video had spread throughout the department. By afternoon, it had reached the county commissioner's office. And by evening, it had landed in the inbox of someone none of them expected, the man who would soon become their new boss. None of them knew that Naomi had a brother who had worked his way up through the ranks in some of the toughest fire departments in the country. A brother who had just accepted the position as Oak Ridge's new fire chief. The joke was about to backfire in ways none of them could imagine. The morning after the incident, the Oak Ridge fire station was unusually quiet. People moved around like ghosts, speaking in whispers, glancing at their phones. The video had spread faster than wildfire. In the harsh light of day, what had seemed like a joke to some now looked much worse on screen. The footage showed everything: Naomi struggling against the duct tape, begging to be released. It showed Jack laughing as he wrapped the tape tighter. It showed Pete making a comment about how she needed to learn her place. Worst of all, it showed the faces of those who walked by and did nothing. Riley sat alone in the corner of the break room, both relieved and terrified. Sending that video had been the right thing to do, but now everyone was trying to figure out who had recorded it. Chief Thompson arrived earlier than usual, his face like stone. At 63, he'd seen a lot in his career, but the lines around his mouth seemed deeper today. He walked straight to his office without greeting anyone, closing the door with a firm click that somehow sounded louder than a slam would have. Naomi hadn't come in for her shift. Nobody blamed her. By noon, the tension in the station was unbearable. The phone rang constantly. Calls from town council members, from the local paper, from concerned citizens who had somehow already gotten wind of what happened. At 1 p.m., Chief Thompson called Jack, Pete, and Rodney into his office. They went in with smirks that quickly faded. 15 minutes later, they emerged with pale faces and suspension notices in their hands. "This is bull." Jack's voice echoed through the station. It was just a prank. Everyone goes through it. Chief Thompson stood in his doorway, suddenly looking every bit his age. "Not anymore, they don't," he said quietly. "And I've been chief long enough to know we've never duct-taped someone to a pole before. You made that tradition up." The three men were sent home, told not to return until further notice. As they left, the other firefighters watched in uncomfortable silence. Some felt the punishment was too harsh. Others wondered if it wasn't harsh enough. By evening, the video had somehow leaked beyond the department. Someone had shared it with friends, who shared it with more friends, and now it was spreading across local social media groups. Comments ranged from outraged to dismissive, splitting largely along racial lines. Some called it a harmless prank. Others used words like assault and racism. The town of Oak Ridge, usually so peaceful, was suddenly divided. At the county commissioner's office, Donna Wilson was having the worst day of her 15-year career. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since morning, and her email inbox was flooded. The video had reached her desk by 10 a.m., and she'd spent hours in emergency meetings with the town's legal team. "This could ruin us," the head lawyer had said. "In today's climate, this could absolutely ruin us." Donna knew he was right. The county was already struggling financially. A lawsuit would devastate them. But more than that, she felt personally responsible. She had always prided herself on how well the county services ran under her watch. This wasn't just a PR disaster, it was a moral failure. At 6 p.m., she made a decision. The current fire chief was set to retire in 3 months anyway. They needed new leadership now, someone who could clean house and change the culture. Luckily, they had already been interviewing candidates for the position. One stood out, a man with an impressive record of turning around troubled departments in bigger cities. His name was Anthony Jackson, and he had accepted their offer just yesterday. Donna picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Mr. Jackson," she said when he answered. "I know you weren't planning to start until September, but we have a situation. How soon can you get here?" She explained what had happened, sending him the video that was now causing such chaos. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that as Anthony watched the footage, his hands gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The woman in the video, the one being humiliated and laughed at, was his little sister. Anthony took a deep breath before responding. "I can be there tomorrow," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "And Miss Wilson, I think it's best if we keep my relationship to Naomi confidential for now." As he hung up, Anthony stared at the frozen image on his phone screen, his sister tied to a pole while grown men laughed. His jaw tightened. Oak Ridge Fire Department had no idea what was coming their way. Word spread quickly through the Oak Ridge Fire Department that a new chief was coming. By morning, everyone knew Chief Thompson had been asked to step aside early, though he would stay on as an advisor during the transition. What they didn't know was who would replace him. The station buzzed with nervous energy. Some firefighters cleaned equipment that was already spotless. Others updated paperwork that could have waited weeks. No one mentioned the 3 suspended men or Naomi who still hadn't returned to work. It was like they were all holding their breath, waiting for something to break. Riley, still unknown as the video source, overheard 2 senior firefighters talking in the locker room. "Heard the new guy's some hotshot from the city," said Vince, a 20-year veteran. "Probably never worked in a small town before." "Probably thinks we're all backwoods country folk," replied Tommy, slamming his locker shut. "Coming here to teach us city ways." Riley said nothing, just quietly finished changing and slipped out. At exactly 9 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the chief's parking spot. The firefighters gathered in the main bay, forming an uneven line like schoolchildren waiting for a new teacher. The door opened, and a tall man in a perfectly pressed uniform stepped out. Anthony Jackson was not what they expected. He moved with quiet confidence, his back straight, his eyes taking in everything at once. He was younger than most had imagined, maybe early 40s, but the ribbons and badges on his uniform told a story of experience far beyond his years. His face gave nothing away as he approached them. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I'm Chief Jackson." He didn't smile, didn't try to win them over with jokes or promises, just stood there, solid as the brick walls around them, waiting. Chief Thompson stepped forward, offered his hand. "Welcome to Oak Ridge, Chief. We're glad to have you." Anthony shook it firmly. "Thank you for staying on to help with the transition. I look forward to learning from your experience here." The words were perfect, respectful, but something in his tone made it clear that while he might learn from Thompson, things would not continue as they had been. One by one, the firefighters introduced themselves. Anthony shook each hand, repeated each name, looked each person in the eye. When it was Riley's turn, Anthony's handshake lingered just a second longer, his gaze more intense, before moving on. Once introductions were finished, Anthony addressed the room. "I know I'm arriving earlier than planned, and under difficult circumstances." He paused, looking around the room. "I've seen the video." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Some looked at their boots. Others stared straight ahead, jaws tight. "I'm not here to point fingers or make assumptions about anyone's character based on one incident, but I am here to be clear about expectations going forward." He began to walk slowly down the line, hands clasped behind his back. "In my department, we will treat each other with respect. We will support each other. We will be professionals who the community can trust." Another pause. "And we will hold ourselves and each other accountable when we fall short." Anthony stopped in the middle of the room, facing them all. 3 of your colleagues are currently suspended. They will not be returning today. I'll be meeting with each of them individually later this week to determine next steps." A murmur went through the group. This was unexpected. Many had assumed Jack, Pete, and Rodney would be back once the new chief took over, maybe with a slap on the wrist, but back nonetheless. "What about Naomi?" someone asked from the back. "Is she coming back?" Anthony's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Ms. Jackson has requested some time off, which has been granted. Whether she returns to this station will be her decision." He looked around the room. "And it will depend partly on the environment she would be returning to." No one made the connection yet, the shared last name, the subtle emphasis he put on it. To them, it was just a coincidence. "Now," Anthony continued, "I'd like a tour of the station, and then I need to review all protocols and procedures currently in place." As the group dispersed and Chief Thompson began showing Anthony around, he paused by the flagpole outside, the one where Naomi had been tied. Duct tape residue still clung to the metal in places. Anthony stared at it for a long moment, his face unreadable. "We should clean that," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," Thompson replied, not meeting his eyes, "right away." What no one at the station realized yet was that Anthony had already called Naomi that morning. "I'm here now," he had told her, "and I promise you things are going to change." 3 days after Anthony Jackson arrived at Oak Ridge Fire Department, the meeting everyone had been whispering about was finally happening. Jack Harris, the ringleader of the pole incident, was scheduled to see the new chief at 10 a.m. sharp. Jack arrived 15 minutes early, clean-shaven and wearing his best clothes, not his uniform since he was still suspended. He sat in the small waiting area outside the chief's office, bouncing his knee nervously. Through the glass wall, he could see Anthony reading something on his computer, his face serious. "He's been like that all morning," whispered Diane, the department secretary who had worked there for 27 years. "Hasn't smiled once." Jack nodded, his mouth dry. He had spent the last 3 days preparing his defense. It was just a joke. Everyone went through something similar. He hadn't meant any harm. The guys were bored. They would have done it to anyone. But sitting here now, those excuses felt hollow even to his own ears. At exactly 10 a.m., Anthony looked up. "Come in, Mr. Harris," he called, his voice carrying through the closed door. Jack stood, wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, and went in. Anthony didn't offer him a seat right away. Instead, he walked to a small TV in the corner of the office and turned it on. Jack's stomach dropped when he saw the paused image, a still from the video showing him wrapping duct tape around Naomi's legs. "I'd like to watch this together," Anthony said quietly, "and then we can talk." For the next 5 minutes, Jack was forced to watch himself from a new perspective. Without the adrenaline of the moment, without his friends laughing alongside him, he saw what everyone else saw: 3 grown men humiliating a woman who was clearly not enjoying the joke. He saw his own face, laughing as Naomi's eyes filled with angry tears. When it ended, Anthony turned off the TV and finally gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sir," he said, sitting down himself, "tell me what you were thinking." Jack started his practiced speech, but it fell apart under Anthony's steady gaze. The words sounded pathetic, childish. He trailed off halfway through. "Can I be honest, sir?" he finally asked. "That would be refreshing," Anthony replied. Jack took a deep breath. "I wasn't thinking. Not really. The guys and we've always messed with the rookies. Nothing this bad before, but I don't know. She was different. She didn't fit in. And instead of helping her fit in, he shook his head. There's no excuse. I know that now." Anthony watched him for a long moment before speaking. "You're right. There is no excuse. What you and your friends did wasn't a prank or a joke. It was harassment, plain and simple." Jack nodded, looking at his hands. "I could fire you," Anthony continued. "Many people think I should. The town lawyer certainly thinks so." Jack's head snapped up, fear clear in his eyes. "But I believe in second chances, Mr. Harris. Not third or fourth, just second. So I'm offering you a choice." Anthony slid a folder across the desk. Inside were 2 papers. The first was a resignation letter, already filled out with Jack's name. The second was what Anthony called a personal accountability plan, a detailed list of steps Jack would need to take to keep his job. Option 1, you resign today, clean record, good references. We never speak of this again. Option 2 is much harder. You'll remain on unpaid leave for 1 month. During that time, you'll complete 40 hours of community service at the women's shelter in the next county. You'll attend weekly sessions with a counselor who specializes in workplace behavior. You'll write a formal apology to Ms. Jackson. And if you return, you'll be on probation for 6 months. Jack stared at the papers, then back at Anthony. "Why would you give me a second chance?" Anthony stood and walked to the window, looking out at the station where generations of firefighters had worked, including Jack's father and grandfather. "Because despite what you did, Chief Thompson says you're a good firefighter. Because this town needs good firefighters. And because I believe people can change when they truly want to." Jack picked up the personal accountability plan with shaking hands. "I'll take option 2, sir. And thank you." Anthony turned back to him, his expression still serious. "Don't thank me yet, Harris. The hard part is still ahead. And one more thing, you don't know Ms. Jackson like I do. She's tougher than all of you put together. Remember that." As Jack left the office, something about the chief's words stuck with him. Something about the way he said, "You don't know Ms. Jackson like I do." It wasn't until he was halfway home that the pieces suddenly clicked into place. Jackson, both their last names were Jackson. The new chief wasn't just any replacement sent to clean up their mess. He was Naomi's brother. The news spread through Oak Ridge Fire Department like a brush fire in August. By lunchtime, everyone knew. The new chief wasn't just any chief. He was Naomi's brother. Jack had told Pete, who told Rodney, who called his cousin who worked at dispatch, and from there it reached every corner of the station within hours. "Did you know?" Vince asked Riley in the kitchen as they made sandwiches side by side. Riley shook their head, though secretly they had begun to suspect something after seeing the chief's reaction to the flagpole. No wonder he's been so tough on Jack and the others. "Think he came here just for revenge?" Vince lowered his voice, glancing toward the hallway. Before Riley could answer, a throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Anthony standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Chief, we were just," Riley began. "Getting lunch. I can see that." Anthony walked to the coffee machine. "Don't stop your conversation on my account." The room fell silent except for the sound of coffee pouring into a mug. Anthony added sugar, stirred slowly, then turned to face them. "Yes, Naomi Jackson is my sister." "No, I didn't request this assignment because of what happened to her." He took a sip of coffee. The timing was coincidental. "I was already in final interviews for the position when the incident occurred." Vince shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we don't think." "You don't have to explain what you think, Vince. I know there are questions, rumors, concerns that I might be biased." Anthony set his mug down. "So let me be clear. My decisions regarding Jack, Pete, and Rodney would be exactly the same if the victim were someone I'd never met." He looked directly at both men, his gaze steady. "The question isn't whether I'm treating them too harshly because they hurt my sister. The question is whether they would have been treated too lightly if I wasn't here." With that, he picked up his coffee and walked out, leaving Riley and Vince speechless. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi sat in her small rented apartment, staring at her phone. She had been avoiding calls and messages from her coworkers for days. Some were supportive. Others awkwardly tried to explain away what had happened. A few seemed angry, as if she was causing trouble by not just laughing it off. Her brother had been calling daily with updates. Jack had chosen the accountability plan. Pete had broken down crying during his meeting. Rodney was still deciding. Anthony was hopeful that real change was possible, but Naomi wasn't so sure. A knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw an older man in a fire department jacket, Chief Thompson. "I'm not here officially," he said when she opened the door. "I just wanted to check on you. See how you're doing." Naomi didn't invite him in, just stood in the doorway. "I'm fine." Thompson nodded, looking down at his worn boots. "I've been with the department for almost 40 years, seen a lot of things change. Some for the better, some not." He paused. "What those boys did to you, that wasn't right. And me not stepping in when I saw it happening, that wasn't right either." "No, it wasn't," Naomi agreed, her voice firm but not angry. "Your brother is making some big changes. Good ones. Things that should have happened years ago." Thompson finally looked up. "The department needs people like you, Naomi. People who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or guilt, but found only genuine regret. "I haven't decided if I'm coming back." "I understand that. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't." He handed her an envelope. "But before you decide, I want you to know that every firefighter in that station signed this. Even the ones who weren't directly involved that day." Naomi took the envelope cautiously. "What is it?" "An apology, and a promise to do better." Thompson turned to leave, then paused. "Your brother is a good man. A good chief. But he's going to need allies." After he left, Naomi opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper with signatures covering both sides. At the top, in simple letters, were the words, "We failed you. We are sorry. We will do better." She read each name slowly, recognizing some, unfamiliar with others. The last signature, in the bottom corner, was Riley's, followed by a small note. "I took the video. I should have done more. I'm sorry." Naomi sat on her couch, the letter in her lap, and made a phone call. "Anthony, I think I'm ready to talk about coming back." A month passed at the Oak Ridge Fire Department. The leaves were starting to change color, painting the small town in shades of orange and gold. Inside the fire station, other changes were taking place too. Naomi's first day back had been awkward. She'd walked through the doors with her head held high, her brother deliberately staying in his office to let her handle things on her own. Some folks couldn't look her in the eye. Others went out of their way to welcome her back. Riley had simply given her a nod from across the room, which somehow meant more than all the forced smiles and apologies. Now, 4 weeks later, she was sitting in the break room having lunch when Pete walked in. His suspension had ended yesterday. He froze when he saw her, clearly not expecting her to be there. "I can eat somewhere else," he said quickly, already backing toward the door. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "It's a free country," she finally said, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Room enough for both of us." Pete hesitated, then sat down as far from her as possible. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the occasional crinkle of sandwich wrappers. "Your brother makes us take these classes now," Pete said suddenly, staring at his food. "About respect in the workplace and all that. Made us role-play situations and everything." Naomi said nothing, just waited. "I thought it would be stupid, you know." But he looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "I'd learned some things. About how what seems funny to one person can feel really different to someone else. About power and stuff." It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but Naomi could tell it was genuine. "Good," she said simply. In another part of the station, Anthony was leading a training session with the newer recruits. The department had hired 2 more women since he'd taken over, as well as a Latino man who had previously applied 3 times without success. In emergency situations, communication is everything, Anthony was saying, his voice carrying through the training room. If you can't trust the person next to you, if you can't talk openly with them, people get hurt. Buildings burn down. Lives are lost. The recruits nodded, taking notes. That's why building a culture of respect isn't just about being nice. It's about being effective. He pointed to a diagram on the board. "We're changing how we do things around here because the old way wasn't working. Not for everyone." Across town, Jack was finishing his last day of community service at the women's shelter. What had started as a punishment had somehow become something more. He'd spent the first week mopping floors and taking out trash, avoiding eye contact with everyone. By the second week, he'd started talking with some of the staff. By the third, he was helping fix broken doors and leaky pipes, using skills he'd picked up as a firefighter. Today, as he packed up his tools, the shelter director handed him a card signed by the staff. "You know," she said, watching him read it, "we usually can't get anyone to help with maintenance around here. Our budget's too small." Jack looked up, an idea forming. "What if I could get some of the guys from the station to volunteer? We could set up a regular schedule, maybe once a month." The director smiled. "That would be amazing." Back at the station, Rodney was leading a different kind of initiative. He'd put together a team to visit schools and talk about fire safety. But unlike previous years, they weren't just focusing on the technical aspects. "We want kids to see that firefighters come in all shapes, sizes, and colors," he explained to his team, which included Naomi and Riley, "so they can picture themselves doing this job someday if they want to." As the evening shift began, Anthony stood in his office doorway, watching the station at work. There was still tension in some corners, still uncomfortable moments when someone said the wrong thing or old habits surfaced. But there was progress too. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "Dinner at my place tonight? Bringing Riley too." Anthony smiled, the first real smile many at the station had seen from him. Change was happening, slowly but surely. Not just policies and procedures, but hearts and minds. Outside, the old flagpole stood clean and tall, no trace of tape remaining. But its presence still served as a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong, and how much work it took to make them right again. 1 year had passed since the incident at the flagpole. Oak Ridge Fire Station looked different now, fresh paint on the walls, new equipment in the bays, and most importantly, new faces among the crew. The department had grown to include 5 women and several people of color. The change wasn't just in numbers, though. It was in the atmosphere, in how people talked to each other, in the easy way they worked together during emergencies. Today, the station was hosting an open house for the community. Children climbed on the trucks while their parents chatted with firefighters. Tables of food lined the driveway. A bounce house wobbled in the parking lot. Chief Anthony Jackson moved through the crowd, shaking hands and answering questions, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen him during those first tense months. Near the refreshment table, Naomi was showing a group of young girls how to put on breathing equipment. "It's heavy," she warned as one tiny child nearly toppled under the weight. "But you get stronger the more you practice." From across the lawn, Jack watched her with the children. A year ago, he never would have imagined she'd still be here, that any of them would be. His month of community service at the women's shelter had turned into regular volunteer work. He'd even started dating one of the counselors there, something his former self would have found hilarious, but that now felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Penny for your thoughts," said Riley, appearing beside him with 2 cups of lemonade. Jack accepted one with a nod of thanks. Just thinking about how much has changed. Remember how we used to be? Riley snorted. You mean how you used to be? Some of us weren't jerks. Fair enough. Jack grinned, taking the jab good-naturedly. I deserved that. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the festivities. The department's new therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever named Buddy, was entertaining a circle of children while Pete explained how the dog helped firefighters deal with stress after tough calls. Rodney was leading tours of the station, proudly showing off the newly renovated living quarters that now properly accommodated all genders. His previous anger had channeled into passionate advocacy for department improvements. Chief's going to make a speech soon, Riley said, checking the time. Think he'll mention the incident? Jack shook his head. Doubt it. He's never been one to dwell on the past. But when Anthony stepped onto the small platform set up in front of the station, the past was clearly on his mind. A year ago, he began, his voice carrying across the now quiet crowd, I came to Oak Ridge under difficult circumstances. Many of you know what happened. Some of you witnessed it. Others just heard rumors. Naomi moved to stand near the front, her face betraying nothing. I could talk about all the improvements we've made since then. The new equipment, the better response times, the higher rating from the county. But that's not what I'm most proud of. Anthony looked around at his team, scattered throughout the crowd. What matters most is how these men and women have chosen to grow, to learn from mistakes, to become better not just as firefighters, but as people. His eyes found Jack, Pete, and Rodney in turn. Some had further to go than others, he added with the hint of a smile. But every person here has contributed to creating something special, something the whole town can be proud of. Near the back of the crowd, old Chief Thompson nodded in agreement, his eyes a bit watery. As the speech ended and the crowd dispersed back to the festivities, Naomi found herself standing alone by the flagpole. It had been repainted last fall, the old metal shining like new in the summer sun. She placed her hand on it briefly, feeling its solidity. Jack approached cautiously, his usual confidence subdued. Still hard to look at it sometimes. Naomi considered the question. Not as much anymore, she finally said. Now it reminds me of what we overcame, not just what happened. Jack nodded, understanding. Your brother changed us. Changed me. He helped, Naomi agreed. But the choice to change was yours. She looked around at the station, at the diverse group of people now wearing the Oak Ridge uniform with pride. Everyone thinks this story is about how you all learned a lesson when you found out the new chief was my brother. But that's not really it. No? Jack asked. Naomi shook her head. The real lesson is that it shouldn't have taken that connection for people to see that what happened was wrong. She smiled slightly. But I'm glad it worked out this way all the same. In the distance, a child's laughter rang out as Anthony demonstrated how the fire hose worked, creating an impromptu rainbow in the spray. The past couldn't be erased, but the future, that was looking brighter than anyone could have imagined 1 year ago.